Hello everyone, welcome to our virtual tour. So I think we're only just on 12 now. I'm sure we'll have a few more people arriving as we get going, but I'll get started with our introduction now so that we can jump straight into it. I'll just share my screen quickly. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that now. So like I said, welcome to our virtual tour of Long Meg and her daughters and the archaeology dig that's taking place on site that you can see in that photo there. My name is Ginny and I'm a community archaeologist with DigVentures. For those of you who haven't met us before, we're a team of archaeologists who are on a mission to connect people who love archaeology with opportunities to actually do it for themselves. So that can be in the fields, joining us on a dig, or online events and online courses just like this one here. We've got lots and lots to go on. This dig and our event today as well is all taking place as part of a partnership that we have with the Fellfoot Forward Landscape Partnership Scheme too. So for anyone who isn't sure who they are, isn't acquainted with them, it's led by the North Pennines Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Partnership. And the Fellfoot Forward scheme is a major project to conserve, enhance and celebrate the natural and cultural heritage of a special part of the northwest of England. The Fellfoot Forward landscape stretches from the Cumbrian fell side of the North Pennines and UNESCO Global Geopark all the way to the River Eden and runs north from Melmerby and Hallbank Gate to Hallbank Gate. It's developed with local communities and organisations, and it's going to be running till 2024. And the scheme was awarded funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund too. So there's lots of people who've made all of this possible. And that's why we're here today. As part of this Fellfoot Forward scheme, we're delivering this programme of events called Uncovering the Past, which is designed to reveal and share previously unknown histories from the area and ensure that people living in or around the area can be a part of that process too. Hence why we're here today. So like I mentioned, we have generous funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and also we have funding from Cumbria County Council as well. So I just want to say a big thank you to all those people I've mentioned just now who have made all of this possible before we get started and get enjoying today. Coming up today, I'm going to do a very brief introduction to the site and show you sort of where it is in the UK for anyone who's coming from further afield. Then we'll get to go live to Jodie. You'll get to see the stone circle, hear from the archaeologists and see our dig site that we've been working on this year and get all up to speed with everything Long Meg and her daughters. And last but not least, like I said, we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end where we'll answer as many of your questions as we can. So do feel free to collect those and drop them in the Q&A or the chat as we go, and I'll make sure that we get to them. So first up, a little bit about our site. So Long Meg and her daughters is one of Northern England's finest stone circles, and it's the 5th largest example in the British Isles. You can see it's located up in Cumbria there. A few of you have said that you've been there before, you live locally, that's really fantastic. You'll know it well. But for anyone who's not sure, you can see it on our little map up there. It's originally made up of 68 stones, this circle, plus the solitary Long Meg that you can see on the bottom of the screen there, which is about 20 meters away from the circle itself. But nowadays, only 26 of those stones remain standing. The site dates back to the Neolithic age or the Stone Age, so that's about 6,000 years ago, just to place that in your minds. And there are many really interesting legends that surround the stones too. The most famous of which claims that they were once a coven of witches that were turned to stone by a wizard. So they've captured the imagination of people for a long, long time. But what are we doing here? So earlier this year, our team went out to Long Meg and built upon geophysical survey which had previously been conducted here. And that revealed some really interesting anomalies in and around Long Meg and her daughters. So we want to answer some questions that they inspired about the circle, what it was used for, what it means, so many questions. As you know, if you're familiar with stone circles, they do still have a bit of mystery to them. We'll be talking about that today. And we wanted to sort of establish that chronology of the site and its uses as well. in essence, it's a really fascinating puzzle, and archaeology can help answer some of those questions and fill those gaps in our knowledge. So with help from local communities, we have a really rare opportunity to investigate this nationally important prehistoric monument. And investigate I do have a few highlight photos from our dig so far. Show you. As you can see, we've been finding a few interesting bits of flint. We've been uncovering, searching for ditches and uncovering some of that soil, having a look underneath the ground, seeing what we can spot. And we're really, really intrigued by what we're finding so far and by the stone circle itself. But I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to spoil anything before I hand over to Jodie. So without further ado, I'm going to do just that. I will stop sharing my screen and we'll head over to Long Meg, to Jodie, and have a look for ourselves. There she is. Hi, Jodie.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. It's nice to see, what have we got, over 100 people joining us. Very exciting. Yeah, and I'm very happy to show you around the site today. I think what we'll do is we'll give you a nice in-depth overview of what we know about the stone circle, little bits of work that have been done here in the past, kind of think about its setting within this wider landscape concept of the Eden Valley and how important that we think that that is. And then we'll pop over to the trenches and have a look at all the hard work that our lovely venturers have been up to in this last week. So just for context, we are on day 5 of the dig. So we're just past the halfway point. And it gets to that point in which we start thinking about recording and start anticipating putting all the soil back in by hand for Sunday, so that yes, we'll be all wrapped up and we'll put the archaeology back to bed by the end of the week. So what I'm going to do first of all, before we go over to the trenches, I'm going to give you a good look at the stone circle. It seems like a good few of you in the chat know the site and have been here, and then I think for many of you also you'll have never been. Firstly, I'll just say I highly recommend, if you're ever up in this corner of the world, I mean, everyone comes up for the Lake District. That's the popular spot. The Lake District is over there. On a good day, you can see Blencathra, but it's currently kind of hiding in the clouds. So we've got the Lake District to the west and to the southwest here. Over in this direction, you'll start to see Scotland on a clear day. And over here, definitely hiding in the cloud, for which we're glad of, because otherwise we'd be being rained on. Thankfully, it's raining over there on the shelf of the North Pennines, sheltering us kind of on the east side of the site. So we're kind of nestled in this spot in the landscape. We're on this little slope, as you can see, that heads down towards the track at the bottom. And one of the big questions, I guess, is always, you know, why? Why here? Why go to all this effort of bringing these stones upright and setting them in this particular landscape? So we'll think about that as well. There's someone I want to introduce you to, somebody lurking in the background here. Go over and say, hello? Hello! This is, do you want to introduce yourself and say who you are?
I'm Paul Frodsham and I love Long Meg.
Excellent, you're in good company. So let's flip around, we'll go selfie mode here, look. So Paul, we wanted to work with Paul when this came up as an opportunity to dig on the site, because Paul, aka Mr. Long Meg, has spent a lifetime researching and being in love with the site, so we knew that we needed to get him involved. Also, you've dug here before, right?
I've been involved with projects here before, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So for such an amazing and what we think is nationally important site, it's a little bit under-researched, we think, isn't it? So you've had your excavation here a few years ago. Aside from that, that was the first time anyone had formally put a spade in the ground, right?
Let's just say if it was down south, a bit more work would have been done here than has been, and leave it at that for now.
Right, yes. Always a contentious issue. What do you want to start with, Paul? Shall we have a look at Long Meg?
Yes, let's have a look at Long Meg.
Absolutely. I'll flip the camera around and we can have a look. So yeah, talk us through what we're looking at here and what you think its significance is.
Well, first of all, your viewers should be aware that I'm still recovering from COVID and my brain doesn't work, so I'll do my best. But no, this is my favourite stone in the world. This is just a very, very special stone. This is Long Meg, and the stones, the circle, are her daughters. And I well remember coming here, scarily, it's now 40 years ago, as an undergraduate, jumping out of a minibus just over there under the trees and getting out and going, wow, you know, what is this? And how on earth can we study it? And I waited and I waited for somebody to do some work here, and nobody did. So when the time came, with colleagues from Durham University and from a project called Altogether Archaeology that was then part of the North Pennines AONB partnership, is now an independent group, we came out here and we did 1 week survey and we did 1 week excavation. And the results really have been quite extraordinary. That's what you can do when you come to places in Northern England where people haven't worked a great deal before. This stone, which is red sandstone, which comes from the River Eden, which is just about a mile away behind me, has these extraordinary concentric circle and spiral carvings, which are really very difficult to see today because the light is not ideal, but with light shining across the stone, they really come to life. They are effectively Irish carvings, an Irish kind of carving. And well, people always say, well, why are they here? Maybe that's something we'll touch on as we walk around and talk about the site a little bit more. But we have to think in terms of this being a special place and not a back and beyond place where that wasn't in touch with other places. So Longmeg is red sandstone, presumably goes at least a third down into the ground below. There's an argument that these carvings could have been on her before she was quarried. You can look around, got different sides of the stone and come up with all sorts of different ideas and theories, but very different from her daughters, which are all what geologists call Borrowdale volcanics, just presumably dropped in this part of the world by the glaciers during the Ice Age. But we don't know that. And we know that elsewhere people moved big stones long distances. So we know that these stones came from the Lake District, but we don't know to what extent they were kind of dumped here by the ice, and to what extent they may have been brought by people. Even if they were dumped close to here, moving them to this place is still a vast undertaking. So it'd be interesting to try and work out. It's interesting that in the mid-18th century, before a lot of the agricultural enclosure took place, the stones were smashed up to build field walls, it was recorded that there were no similar stones anywhere in the vicinity. So either the Neolithic people found all of them and brought them all here, or they have brought them from somewhere else.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's a question we get asked quite a bit. Is there any chance that we'll ever be able to know that for sure, know where the actual stones have come from, or will that remain a bit of a mystery, do you think?
I think perhaps that's one of the mysteries about the place. I mean, I always say to people as well, when I start talking about this place, there will always be mysteries. That's part of the value of it. I see it in two different ways. They're interlinked, but different ways. On one level, I see it as a spiritual place that makes me feel happy, which I think is great. So sometimes I like not think about that too much, but at the same time, it's a fantastic archaeological puzzle. It's something we can look at and think about, dig holes, and try and work out answers to questions. But maybe the real value of the place lies somewhere between those two, or by merging those two things together.
Yeah. Perhaps we can touch on some of the things that we do know then. So okay. we talk about these big monuments and this Neolithic monumental complex of building and this big phase of activity that happens. Can we pin a more precise date on what we think we're looking at here?
One of the most important things to remember about Longmeg is the stones are only part of the story. They're a very important and very big part of the story, obviously, but they're only a part of the story because to the north of the site and with a diameter, the stone circle is approximately 112 meters across, and to the immediate north of it is a huge earthwork enclosure, big ditched enclosure, which is approximately twice the diameter of the stone circle.
Wow.
And that you can't see it on the ground today, when you kind of can just, but to all intents and purposes you can't, because it's been plowed flat, and that goes all the way around the farm in the distance behind those trees. So when we did our excavations in 2015, we only opened 3 very small trenches, but we were looking at the relationship between that enclosure and the stone circle. And by a combination of good luck and good planning, we found a place where we thought there was a stone missing from the stone circle, and we excavated the stone socket and found nothing in it at all, apart from a few packing stones. But the brilliant people at the laboratory in Durham managed to find enough charcoal from that fill of that feature to give us a date. And we got a date, which is the best date that we have for the stone circle. Of course, it only dates one stone.
Right.
And even then it's radiocarbon date, so it's not an exact thing. But in round numbers, the stone circle conveniently is 5,000 years old. It's about 3000 BC. And I believe that date. I think that's absolutely spot on in terms of the few others that we have for stone circles. So I think that's right. I don't think the whole thing was built in a year. I think it was probably built in generations. That's another story about why it was built. But I suspect if we found other stone holes and got other dates, we would find a range of dates, possibly over centuries.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the great enclosure, which abuts it to the north, or I should say the stone circle abuts the enclosure to the south, that's possibly another 1,000 years old.
Wow.
It's certainly several centuries old.
Yeah.
Because we got dates from the backfill ditch. So it's not just the stones. I mean, the stones are fantastic, but there's a lot more here as well. And there are other features picked up by air photography and geophysical survey as well. So it's a big, extensive complex which had if you like, a kind of an active life of many centuries. Yeah, possibly 2,000 years.
So that kind of gives us a little bit of a tantalizing clue when we ask the question, like, why here? There's stuff going on even before the stone circles are here. That big enclosure that's on the north side of the site now going around the farmhouse. Do we have a sense of why that may have been there in the first place?
Yes. And in a way, this is the answer to the whole question of why the whole Long Meg complex is here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what people are looking at me. It's much nicer to look that way.
We can look that way.
If we look that way, you might get an idea that where the trees are is in a dip. From where we're standing now, you look down and you're looking down into a dip, and actually they're in a sort of roughly oval-shaped natural hollow in the ground, and that's what the great enclosure goes around. So it's encircling that dip, and in that dip on the edge of it is a spring. So water has been bubbling up out of the ground from this spring forever, for all intents and purposes, and it's flowing down a natural gully, which becomes a very steep-sided natural valley, which then flows down to the River Eden, kilometre or so to the south, to the north, sorry. That I think is very significant on a spiritual level, but also on a practical level, because it means that if you left this site and you went down that little valley and you got to the River Eden, you can get on a boat, you can get on a boat, you can get up to the Solway, you can get to the Irish Sea, you can get to Ireland, to Orkney, even Stonehenge if you want to. You can go where you want, on the river. So this is not that much of a back and beyond place, and that's quite an important thing to realise. And if we look over to the east, where now we can see not a lot apart from clouds, that's the North Pennines, and over the other side of those hills is Northumberland, Durham, Yorkshire, the northeast of England, and of course we get a lot of flint coming over from Yorkshire, and there's interactions between the different places. Indeed, when we did our little excavations, and remember we only opened a tiny little percentage of the site, we found that we got Arran pitchstone, which comes from only down of Arran over there. We got bits of Cumbrian axes, smashed up Langdale axes, which come from Langdale and the Central Lake District over there. And we've got Yorkshire flint, which comes, of course, from Yorkshire over there. So people will come into this place from all, well, it doesn't prove people are coming from those places, but I think they did. They came here from all those places, and this was a special place where people met. Remember, I'm talking hundreds of years before the stone circle.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was already a special place when people decided to build that.
Yeah, and we're kind of slap bang in the middle of the British Isles if you're including places like Orkney as well, right?
People always talk about the north.
Yeah,
this is the north.
Yeah,
it's not the north, it's the middle. As far as Britain's concerned, it's smack in the middle. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like this kind of very central point. If there are people and or technology moving kind of north south across the country, they're likely coming through here, right?
Well, here's a thought. Not very long ago, everything came from down south. Stonehenge was the important place, Avebury, all the important things down south. That's where all the work was done. That's where everything came from. And us turkeys up north, we kind of copied their ideas and made stone circles because they did. Okay, now things have kind of flipped, and now everything's from Orkney. So first stone circles are on Orkney. So they had the brilliant ideas, and then us thickies in the middle, we copy them. Okay, but we now know that this stone circle is one of the very earliest stone circles that there is. So we don't necessarily have to look to other places for our ideas all the time. That's just a personal thing that I like to get out there to people, and I'm quite happy to discuss it with anybody who wants to discuss it. But we people in Northern England, Central Britain, are perfectly capable of inventing their own things, having their own ideas. I'm sure there were these links with other people all over the place, but we mustn't always put our region down as an area that just copied things from elsewhere. I mean, the Langdale Axe is one of the most important places in Neolithic Britain, and that's up north or central.
Yes, absolutely. Well, shall we wander a bit closer to the stone circle and have a look at the circle itself? So we talked about Long Meg being our kind of more local red sandstone, and we think that that's probably come from very close down on the banks of the River Eden, a kilometre or two that way. And these are our big kind of glacial erratics, as you've described.
We'll just from this.
Right, yes. I mean, the canny amongst us paying attention on the tour may have noticed an interesting little feature on this side of the stone circle. Feel free to pop in the chat if you spotted what it is.
Well, what the site effectively is a huge, it's not a circle, that's another thing that's worth saying. It's not a circle. It's the easiest thing in the world to make a circle. Put a post in the ground and you get some strength or whatever, and you make a circle. It's nowhere near a circle, it didn't matter. And that's another question for another time, but it's perfectly obvious to me that the site is built over a long period of time by different people at different times. But what the basic idea is that you've got these huge, great big stones, of which there are a small number of absolutely huge ones, and then these which are still dragging very far, in between. And where they've got a flat surface, the flat surface is facing inwards into the circle. Except here, because this one, which is still standing, has its flat surface facing this one. And the reason for that is because this is the so-called entrance. Now, it's called an entrance because that's a word that we understand, an entrance. But to be honest with you, I think it's more like to be an exit, but it's probably neither. There's no evidence that people ever walked in and out of this. It could be, if you like, just like an altar in a church. It's part of the symbolic structure of the site. Right,
a focal point kind of thing.
Well, yes, for some reason they're focusing on this area here, but it gets called the entrance. So we'll just call it the entrance.
Sure.
And this one's fallen. This one has interesting. You can always see new things just by walking around these places and looking. This huge great lump of quartz, which I think was on the top of the stone standing upright, would have been in line with Long Meg from this so-called entrance. So it's not without significance at all. It's important. There's no other things like that on any of the other stones.
So that's quite unique.
So why is this feature here, and why is it where it is? One of the most amazing things about Long Meg, and people who know about the great Neolithic monuments, Stonehenge, it's how Newgrange, and numerous others, is that they have alignments on the sun at the solstices, and most, I think, most commonly and most importantly on the winter solstice, either the sunrise or the sunset at the winter solstice, which today we call Christmas, but it's the same idea. It's the shortest day of the year. It's a time when people come together to celebrate. You have a religious side to it as well, but it's about having fun together in the middle of the winter, and that's what people were doing here at Long Meg. And the alignment from within the circle through these entrance stones out to the Long Meg is exactly in line with the winter solstice sunset. Don't believe me? Come here and you can watch it. Except the last 2 times I've been here, I haven't seen the sky and the sun because it's been so.
It's a problem in Cumbria, isn't it? Yeah.
But I have been here and I have seen it, and it does work. And another thing is as well that Stukely in 1725, who produced the first useful drawing of the site, he recorded. Can you see on the camera the building behind the stone behind Long Meg? Roughly on the side of that building, there was another stone circle, which is completely lost now.
Yeah,
I think it might sort of just survive a little bit, but basically it's gone. And the sun would effectively be sinking into that other stone circle behind
Yeah.
long make. So there's a whole
Amazing.
complex of things going on here.
Yeah.
And the winter solstice, people will argue that Stonehenge is aligned on the summer solstice, but I would say it is, but primarily it's aligned on the winter solstice.
Yeah.
The problem with Stonehenge is it's on both.
Right.
So, but I think it's the winter solstice that is the most important thing. And you can understand that, really. The shortest day of the year, the sun's at the lowest point in the sky,
Yeah.
whatever rituals have been done from time immemorial, that you just have to, you have to do the same. It's not worth taking the risk of not doing those same things again, because you desperately want it to start getting a bit brighter and be springtime.
Yes, it's a huge act of faith that the warm days will return and the sun will start staying out longer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's something to do with people here, that people came here at that time to celebrate, but quite possibly hundreds of people from a long way away as well came here. And I like to think that that's when a lot of the stones got put up as well.
Yes.
Because you've got hundreds of people here, and part of the whatever festival or activity was going on was perhaps erecting new stones.
Yes.
In the circle.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? We see the site as it is now. We think of it as this kind of quote unquote complete thing. But presumably all of these stones weren't just set up in a season. It didn't necessarily happen all at the same time. Do you think there's significance in the fact that, this is a labour of love over probably many, many years and possibly decades,
yes,
maybe even centuries?
And I think that's another fundamental thing about these sites, and especially about this one, that nowadays, if you want something, say you want a supermarket, you will get an architect, and your architect will draw your plans for the supermarket, and you'll then go through a process of building the supermarket, building the building, and then it'll be opened and it'll start the business. And really, all you want is it opened for business. The plans and the building are just the processes that you have to go through to get the building that you want at the end of the day. Yeah. And I think these sites are completely different. The real value in this place is in the building.
Yeah.
It's the communal activity of people coming together, putting all the effort into finding the stones, dragging them to the site and setting them upright. Yeah. It's almost like on a kind of a simple level, think process rather than product.
Yes.
Yes, the product is this that we're looking at today, and it's fantastic. And of course, it would have been very significant to people thousands of years ago. But actually, the real value of it is in the process. It's in the people coming together and say, going out, finding the stones, and putting the effort into the construction.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like it. Seems like when we're kind of thinking about stone circles and the effort that it takes to build them, the traditional notion has always been that this has to be a result of social stratification, right? There has to be some sort of chieftain or king who has got the authority and the resources to be able to bring all these people together and make them do this. But that almost seems a bit kind of old-fashioned now. I mean, it seems like it's perhaps more interesting to think about community and collaboration and cooperation and all of these things just as much as the big boss man in charge kind of thing.
Whether there was a big boss man or woman in charge, just I'd say that because it's the right thing to say today.
Very good.
Whether there was or not, we'll never know. I don't think we'll ever know.
Yeah.
Whether it was some kind of what we would call today religious, although of course always have to remember that religion was just not a concept in those days. Religion was just part of everyday life. They weren't separate things. Yeah. I say that as a fact. I'm fairly certain that must have been the case.
Yes.
So no, we won't know the actual mechanisms of how these things were built. But what I would say is because you're getting sort of similar things built in different places, and as often as not, more often than not, there are what we might call nodes in the landscape, places where, on networks, places where people are coming to, places to which people are coming from distant lands. So they're not just like a parish church working for just a local parish. They're working somehow as special places for lots of people. Yes, of course, local people based locally, but also for people from a long, possibly from hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, amazing. Well, should we take a wander over onto the north side of the stones, maybe? And perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about what happened in 2015.
Yeah, I mean, as we're walking across the site, we just noticed things like, for example, to the left, which is to the west, all the stones are against the sky. If you look the other way to the east, they're nowhere near the sky.
Yeah, so we're on we're on quite a significant slope. It doesn't necessarily feel like it, but
it is a significant slope.
yeah.
As far as we know, the land to the west was completely available. So if they'd wanted to build on a nice flat, slightly higher ground up there, that was available to build stone circle.
Yeah.
But they didn't, because that wasn't the right place for it. As I've said before, it has to link to this great enclosure, which we're walking right towards now, even though we can't see it.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I mean, we'll see it when we get to these northern stones, but you mentioned it's not an exact circle, and the stones on this end seem to be kind of particularly squished and flattened. Have you got a sense of why that is?
Well, it's quite interesting, because in the past people have done surveys and come up with great theories as to why this circle and others have flattened arcs, and why haven't they just built them as a circle. But in fact, we can see quite clearly from air photographs and from the geophysical survey that we did, and indeed from the excavation that we did, that this northern, and it's straight. I mean, when we get to it in a few seconds, you can look along it. It's not only a squashed arc, it's just straight. And it's exactly in line, and in fact on top of the backfilled ditch of the enclosure.
Right, so they've really respected the line of that earlier earthwork when they've then built the circle.
Absolutely. So there's something going on, even though the enclosure is hundreds of years earlier, but there's something still about the link between that and the stone circle, that the stone circle, we're always going to call it a stone circle, but the stone ring, the stone circle, is in line with it. And you can see that here. You can see how those stones are in a straight line. You see it much more clearly from the air.
Yes.
But you know, it's undeniable. And just here, here's another thing that I might just mention in passing. Rabbits. Imagine that at Stonehenge.
Yeah,
let's leave it at that. Sorry. So we excavated. I thought there was another. You know, we called the site over there by Longmeg the entrance, even though we said maybe not the right one. So this got called the back entrance, even though again it's probably not an entrance, and if it was, I think it's more likely to be the front entrance. Right. People are going in this way. But where I'm standing was where we thought there must be another stone missing to make two outer portal stones, same as the other side. Yeah, because there's also on the air photography a gap through the ditch of the enclosure. Almost to say there's been a gap between the two right here. And this was the stone that we excavated, the stone socket that we excavated, found the packing stones. And where I said before about the brilliant people in the laboratory got the charcoal out of the sample, and we got a date. Yes, which is about 3000 BC. We also found other features as well, post holes, pits, which seemed to go with. Some of them went with the date of the enclosure, and some of them went with the date of the stone circle. So, as ever, dig a hole, you get more questions than answers. But we proved, at least with just 1 week. In fact, from memory, I think we lost one, if not 2 days to the weather as well. But very small scale excavation, the potential is here to find out so much more. Yeah, and I just wanted to cycle back to this being a particularly good spot for a trench in terms of a stone socket. Getting into the nitty gritty of archaeology, we know that this field has been ploughed subsequently. We can see the medieval ridge and furrow still really clearly. You can even see it from the ground in places as well. So there's that sense of, the best place to find archaeological material which is undisturbed, which is going to help us with dating, is right underneath the actual stones themselves, right? But then that's not a very practical thing to try and start digging a hole into. Yes, except that you can look around and you can see where there are gaps. We know from records from Stokely and others that there were times when some of the stones were blown up. Right. For building stone. Yes. In fact, at one time, there's a legend that the landowner decided to blow it up because he was fed up with tourists. So tried to blow it up. And then there was the biggest storm ever seen in Cumbria, which must have been quite a big storm, given what storms in Cumbria are like. And so all the workmen ran away and refused to come back and touch it ever again. So those kind of stories are great. But there are certainly gaps where I'm sure that stones have gone. So in fact, we will. There is, I think, access to other stone sockets, without having to move stones. Yes, yes. And incidentally, one other thing, the number of the stones is 69, and I have been asked on more than one occasion, is there any special symbolic significance of sacred significance of the number 69, and I have to say no.
Sure.
That is the number of stones that are left
Yes.
now, and
Yes.
that we've no idea how many there were originally.
Yeah.
But there would have been quite a lot more. I'm fairly certain quite a lot more.
Yeah.
Than Longmaker herself and the 68 daughters.
Yes.
In fact, we know already.
Right.
There's one here.
The missing
so
one.
That makes 70 already.
And there's, do you think that, so all of the ones that are on their side have likely gone over? We think they would have all been upright at some point.
I think so.
Yeah.
There is we can't know that for certain. It may, on some occasions, stones were dragged here, and some of them are quite dumpy shaped stones that maybe wouldn't have stood upright very well. So some of them may have just been placed. But these ones on this north side, we put another trench through just along there, and where two of them had fallen, we could see the packing stones and the holes. Unfortunately, they'd fallen in such a way that we couldn't excavate the stones, the holes. Yeah. But we could see the packing stones, and there was no doubt that they had fallen. And these ones in this straight line along here have all fallen, and they've all fallen because they're actually set in the backfilled ditch of the enclosure. So there's just been a degree of substance.
So it's softer.
That's what's caused them all to fall over. If you look around, you know, I mean, that's the eastern arc of the circle over there. Yeah. It's exactly the same as on Stukely's drawing of 1725. There's not a single stone fallen. It's just the same as how he recorded it. Yeah. So they're obviously well set. Yeah. Those that are set upright.
Amazing. And considering, I mean, the ones that remain upright have done so for 5,000 years. It's pretty impressive.
I think so, especially in Cumbrian weather.
Well, saying that, we've just got a bit of sun come through, and that makes everything look very attractive, doesn't it? Shall we have a wander over to the trenches and see what these guys are up to then? Yeah, so, I mean, as we say, we think the site is very under-researched. We've had small trenches that Paul did a few years ago, and then this year we've opened up 3, again, relatively small trenches on the west side of the circle. And all of this it's just a fraction of the site as a whole, especially when you consider, the wider landscape and the fact that it isn't just the stone circle, there's everything that's kind of related to it as well. And so, we're really just scratching the surface in terms of what we can figure out with these archaeological trenches. But I guess that the hope is that, each time you get a bit of an insight and you get a little bit of dating material, and then the hopes is that kind of, year upon year, if, people can come back and keep doing interventions, we start to gradually, slowly build up that picture, and that'll go a long way to answering some of those questions in terms of the chronology of the site over time as well, right? In terms of unpicking that sense of how things were built slowly and developed and changed, and the life of the monument, and not just the way that it exists to us now as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I also find it quite intriguing to think about what happened afterwards. Right. I mean, the monument's still here. It was here through the Iron Age. It was here through the Roman times. It was here through early medieval and medieval times. What did people make of it then? And is there any evidence for their activities on the site?
You're not saying that you want us to find Roman stuff on here, are you?
No, as I said the word Roman, I felt really bad about it. I don't know why I did that. It's a very stupid thing to do. I'm sorry.
Opening a can of worms there, aren't
Romans should not be banned in a special place. Romans should not be mentioned in a special place like this. But there we are.
Yes. Well, that's quite a good segue in terms of talking about what we can expect to find on a site like this. I mean, people who've kind of had some experience in archaeology, been on community digs perhaps, know that the further back in time you go, especially when you get into this Neolithic period, obviously we're pre-metal artifacts. And so the archaeology is really quite ephemeral. It's why archaeologists love it so much, because it's such a challenge and it's such a puzzle. But it does mean that, unlike being in Roman Carlisle up the road.
Said it again.
I should say it. That we're just, we're not dealing with buckets of finds. We're looking for these very ephemeral traces in the soil, and if we're lucky, we'll get a few bits and bobs along the way in terms of artifacts. In fact, I think the finds trays are over here. Shall we wander over and have a look? So I'm pleased to report that we have a grand total of 2 bits of worked stone so far, although, we've got 3. Oh yes, sorry, we do have 3. And you can see our hardy volunteers. Here is Chris doing excellent work in terms of increasing our chances of being able to grab a couple more. So Let me scoop up some of these things. The eagle-eyed amongst you will spot slightly more modern bits and bobs, but what have we got in our little baggie
I'm
here?
guessing this is special because it's in a little bag.
I think it's just we're being careful not to let it float away, I think. So this little one has come out of this trench number 2.
Nice little piece of flint.
Yes, so that's what we're keeping our eyes peeled for, isn't it? That lovely shiny glassy flint, which makes such excellent sharp stone tools. So as I say, this is before metalworking, where people's primary mode of making tools and existing and doing all those basic things that you need to live, like butchery and cutting and weaving and all of that stuff, you are chipping off these lovely sharp flakes of flint and making stone tools in all manner of shapes and sizes that are then used in steel.
And it doesn't occur naturally in this landscape.
Right.
So it may not look much, that little piece of flint, but it's been brought in from somewhere.
Yeah. So that is evidence that people have brought this here. It's not just here by happenstance. And you mentioned that the flint likely comes from Yorkshire. So that's coming
Well,
from...
some of the almost certain, well, it is certainly from Yorkshire, yes.
Yes. Absolutely. And we have another little nice shiny bit of stone. Perhaps you can talk us through.
I don't want to get drawn too much on that.
Okay.
I don't want to get drawn too much on that, but it's I mentioned before that we did find the Arran pitch stone, and tiny little flakes, which in themselves are not particularly diagnostic of anything other than the fact that the stone's being worked here. But it's come all the way from Arran. So again, it's that interesting link between the Isle of Arran to the northwest, Yorkshire to the east, and Langdale to the southwest. The things are all coming together here. But I don't want to get too drawn on that.
Sure.
I'm afraid. It might be somebody who's more expert at these things than me to have a look at it.
Sure. So that's our main kind of thing that we're looking for, those lovely flakes and bits of worked stone tools. In terms of the actual kind of archaeology in the ground, I might go, we're going to have a look at trench 1. So, sunshine, my goodness. So over here in trench 1, we put, the question is, why here with the trenches? Something that I think is worth noting, if you look towards the stone circle, we have that kind of gap in between the 2 stones. And I guess one of the questions would be, is that another one of these missing stones which has disappeared? Interestingly, on the geophysics, it looks like you kind of have 2, like a parallel row of ditches that comes towards us. So Nat positioned, hello Nat. Nat positioned this trench here because the geophysics made it look as though the ditch, that buried feature might end here. And obviously a ditch is a great place to see if we can get into, because that is another good spot for finding datable material. That's something we could get a radiocarbon date from, patches of charcoal or burnt seeds or nutshells, something like that. And of course, things that are in buried features like ditches are more likely to survive that disturbance from later ploughing. So provides a good opportunity for us to get down into those features and recover some material that's still in its archaeological context. So that was the aim for this one, that we'd catch the end of that ditch. People in the Neolithic also do weird things at the ends of ditches where they kind of bury things and seal them off and things like that. So as ever, we are optimistic. So what do you reckon, Nat? Have we got a ditch?
Yeah, we've certainly got a ditch. Whether we've got the end of it or not, I'm not sure. I think it seems to be coming through, and maybe it's tapering off about where we're standing rather than
right
in the trench. But it's quite interesting. It seems to be full of clay at the top, which is not what you'd expect.
Yeah.
But what we have got is a nice patch of charcoal coming through here. Side of the ditch here. So that might be useful for dating. There doesn't seem to be very much other material coming out of the ditch.
Right, okay. Yep.
Or out of this trench at all, really, other than that. I'm assuming you've shown a bit of pitch stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that came out of this trench.
Here.
Yeah.
Daisy found it on the spoil heap, actually.
Well done, Daisy.
It was a good spot. It was a good spot. But yeah, I'm optimistic. We're going to dig down and see if we can get to the bottom of this.
Yes. So that will be nice. Even if, we don't get loads of material evidence that comes out of it, it's still nice to see that shape of the ditch, how deep it is.
Yeah.
Get that nice kind of profile shape of it.
And then if it's got a really nice section, you can see how it's formed and like if there was a bank on one side or not and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it can tell us quite a lot. But yeah.
Excellent.
But I'm hoping that there's a bit of pottery in the bottom saying, yeah, I'm nearly thick.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. So that datable material that we're always looking for. We've talked a little bit about radiocarbon dates and the organic material that you can get from that. Obviously, a great way to also pin some looser dates on things are if we can get bits of pottery which are diagnostic, which are identifiable as certain forms, and that can help us kind of narrow down bits of date ranges for certain activities, doesn't it? Prehistoric pottery can be a bit shabby and a bit hard to spot, though, can't it? Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah. It's done, but 5,000 years old, you can't ask too much of it, can you?
Hobnobby, how we describe it.
Yeah, biscuity, a lump of rotten biscuit.
But it's not always. Sometimes in the early Neolithic, you get some really nice fine stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And this, I feel like it might be earlier. I don't know why.
That's what your spidey senses are saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a good plan then. So to the bottom of the ditch, and if everyone can make their appropriate prayers and libations and sacrifices at home, and we can get a nice bit of pottery at the bottom of the ditch, that would be great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, well, I'm going to wander over and have a look at what Trench 2 are up to. So
there's been some developments.
Oh, some developments. That's what we like. So similar kind of idea over this way. We had some interesting anomalies that came up on the geophysical survey. So we wanted to, there is some interesting developments. We wanted to have a look. We have some happy trowlers. I should mention that everyone here is putting in a good hard stint. Our local people who are involved with the Fellfoot project and who we've been kind of working with over the last year. By this stage, I think it's fair to say they're all canny archaeologists themselves and are well away, and for some reason think that it's a fabulous idea to spend their free time at the end of October in a field in Cumbria. So
I can't see anything wrong with that. It's the best thing to do.
I assume everyone that's also here on the live tour with us agrees that this is a fabulous way to spend your free time as well. So yes, so talk us through what we can see here then, Matt.
So we've got a strange pile of stones in the corner here. They are probably just there coincidentally.
Sure.
But they're looking really lovely.
But we don't.
But we don't know.
Yeah.
So that's why we're cleaning up and cleaning up.
It's not like super stony around here, is it? So if there is a little dense patch of them, you might suggest they've been collected together for some reason.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're having a look in there and seeing what's going on, and we're going down again here, just to see for final sure.
Yeah.
That there's nothing going on up top here.
Super.
There might be.
Yeah, worth another
a
trial.
patch of clay in the corner.
Okay.
It's not very obvious at the moment, but there was. Over here, however, we've got some intriguing things happening.
Oh, okay.
So initially on Tuesday,
Yep.
we found this gully.
Yeah.
It's coming through. You can see it dug in here.
That's a beautiful, nice section you've got there.
And we thought it's quite narrow, not too fairly standard sort of gully thing. But then we got this dark material on the side here.
Yeah.
And that seems to be shooting off this way towards Bruce in there. And then this morning we started excavating out more of this. It goes a bit wider. We're finding more of that dark material going off that way. So what we're starting to do now is we had a patch of clay under here.
Yeah.
And we got this sandy orange natural.
Yes.
The bright orange stuff in here.
Yeah, so you're happy that that's the natural geology there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're just chasing this down to see what's going on. And it looks like we might have some sort of massive ditch terminus or pit or something that wasn't actually seen on geophysics.
Right.
But it's all a bit confusing. It goes a bit wobbly here. we don't really seem to have any sort of edge coming through.
Yeah.
It's going round this way, it's a bit wobbly, and then yeah.
Interesting.
So it's intriguing.
Okay.
We're cleaning it up and seeing what's going on, and then probably going to start taking that clay out, and we'll crack on from there. Really.
Super.
So
sounds like a good plan. Very good. Okay, and I'll quickly take you over to the last and final trench, but I don't think we've got much to show you because that we are just taking off the subsoil on this one. So obviously we've had our 8 days on site, our 3 relatively small trenches to give us the best chance of finding those little bits of datable material, investigate some of those anomalies on the geophys. These guys just doing the absolutely great work of clearing the subsoil off. You see that what they all did is they all booked into day 5 of the dig thinking that they'd avoided the deturfing, and then they arrived this morning and we were like, yeah, cool, grab the spades, we're going to deturf. So you've got to keep these guys on their toes, otherwise they get savvy about what jobs they're going to be given.
I know.
Super. Okay, well, so I think that's everything that I wanted to show you guys. I think we've got some time for questions, thoughts. I can see we've got lots of things in the chat. Ginny, maybe you can help me field some questions. I'm going to have a look through the chat as well and see.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think a good question to start with, I'm going to start with Edward. So Edward is doing his year 3 project, and he wondered if we can give him an interesting fact to include about Long Meg.
Ooh, okay. So I mean, there's all the folklore that exists around it, which I think is really interesting, which is that you won't be able to count the number of stones and get the same number twice. So if you go around the stones clockwise and count them all, then you'll get one number. And if you go anti-clockwise and try to count them again, you'll get a different number. And as an additional fact to that, we have had groups of young people on site this week trying it, and they've all come back with a different number. So yeah, you site and test it for yourself. So I think that's I don't know if that's fact. It seems like a fact to me.
I like it. That's a fun one.
Yes. But in terms of like a good fact to write into a report, I think you want to go with the fact that this looks like it's one of the earliest stone circles in the British Isles. It's older than Stonehenge, so I think it looks like it. So I think that's a good one to go with.
Awesome, thank you. Hopefully that'll help you, Edward, with your project. Yeah, so let's see. The next one, we've had a few sort of questions that are asking very similar things, so I'll smush them sort of into one. A lot of people have been asking about the relationship of Long Meg with other sites in the area, so other stone circles like Little Meg or Glastonbury, and other sort of prehistoric sites.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great bit of insider knowledge. So yeah, when Paul and I were talking about, this is one spot in a really kind of busy and important landscape. I mean, the Eden Valley just is, as we've been talking about, this kind of corridor of these monuments absolutely everywhere. So as we've been saying, in the North Pennines up there hidden in the clouds, later in the Bronze Age, you get all of these lovely great big stone cairns that are built along the top, and they also come down into the valley closer to the River Eden as well. Somebody mentioned Little Meg. Absolutely, she is a very, very little compared to this stone circle over in that direction. If you come and visit, it's good to see if you can see her as well. You access her out through the main road. She's right up against a dry stone wall. Very little stone circle that's just tucked in the corner of a field, appropriately named Little Meg. And then obviously we were talking about our bigger enclosure here, which comes around these trees. There's a path, a trackway that goes all the way through the middle of it. It goes past that spring that seems so important in terms of why the site is here. If you keep going all the way down that track, at the end of it, you come to just outside of a village called Glastonbury. Right at the end of the track, there's Glastonbury Stone Circle, and that also has some rock art carvings on some of the stones as well. So I don't think that's any coincidence at all. I think that's, to me, seems fairly compelling that this trackway is also very ancient, and that people, it's a great way to move between the two sites. Takes you about kind of half an hour or so to walk. It's really not far away at all. And then, of course, you think about everything that's going on in the Eden Valley. If you've ever driven up and down the M6, you know, we're really not too far from Shap here. You can't move for falling over standing stones in Shap. And there's just lots and lots of stone circles in and around the area, ring cairns and things like that. Chock-a-block full of these monuments. This is certainly one of the biggest and seemingly most important in the area, but you know, I would hazard a guess to say we don't even know all of the sites. I think there's still lots to be discovered as well. And as things like technology like LiDAR and those remote sensing methods increase, I think we'll continue to spot these intriguing little sites in the landscape that, we have to recruit some more archaeologists so we've got time to look at them all, I think.
Exactly. Speaking of, you mentioned a minute ago about the carvings, actually we did have one question. Bob was wondering, are there any carvings on the stones that are in the circles similar to Long Meg, or is it just Long Meg that's carved?
Yeah, just Long Meg. So yeah, that's another reason why she is kind of special as the outlier out there. And she's in that different type of stone, that lovely local red sandstone. So yeah, only evidence of carving on her. And all of her daughters, these Borrowdale volcanics, do not appear to be carved in any way. And I think they've had a fair bit of scrutiny. I can imagine that Paul has peered very intently at each one of them. And I think we can say that, yeah, there's no sign of any carvings on these ones.
Awesome. What next? Doug has quite a good question. Doug asked if there's any evidence of anything in the center of the circle. I do know we did a bit of geophysics in the center, and I think Sharon also asked about our geophysics. Could you take us through what that showed, what we think it sort of showed?
Yeah, so the 2014-15 project did really great high quality geophysics all in this field, and I think you can, if you look at our reports page on our website, you'll be able to see some snapshots of some of those results of the geophys that have gone into our project design for this project. So for those of you who love poring over geophysical data, which I'm sure as many of you can have a look. There's one of the kind of legends is that people have seen that there was another internal ring of stones within the stone circle, which of course isn't unusual. We think about kind of when stone circles start to become henge monuments, and you can often have these concentric rings of features and stones, ditches. I have to say nothing like that looks particularly obvious in the geophysics. So, you know, if we might expect to see those stone sockets still underground from where there have been other stones set in the middle, we certainly can't see any of that in the geophys. But there are lots of interesting splodges and strips and ditches and pits. It's very likely that there'll be wooden elements in terms of, you know, post holes, which are perhaps supporting kind of smaller lean-tos or buildings, or if you think about big sites like Woodhenge, often we might think about there being a kind of wood phase of activity to sites like this, which either predates the big stone elements or could even be contemporary to it. So yeah, I mean, as we've said, you know, there's much more to the site than just the standing stones that you can see. So there's a whole host of interesting things going on in the internal space. And as always, you know, not enough time and money to investigate it. You know, we've, like I say, with small trenches over here, trenches over here this year. We just have to hope that there's scope in the future that we can continue adding to that knowledge of the site by seeing if we can open up more trenches in different areas. You know, that's going to be the project of hopefully many, many years and decades. We slowly add to that knowledge of the site.
Awesome. So I think we have sort of come up on time. I think we'll do 2 or 3 more questions. If we don't answer your question, you can email in and we'll happily sort of try and get an answer for you if you absolutely want us to have a look into that. But I'll try and get through a couple more. There are a few more that we can sort of smush together again. A couple of people have asked about the artwork itself, the carvings on the rock. and how similar they are to other sites, either in that area or a little further afield. Is there anything you can tell us about those carvings, what they might mean, what they are, how typical they are?
Yeah, so I'm certainly not a rock art expert, but I can kind of give you an overview of what I understand, which is that, you know, another kind of element to this sense that, you know, this kind of centrally located region in terms of the British Isles and further afield, we see actually quite a few different types of rock art kind of converging on this place, which kind of adds to that sense of, you know, people and ideas are coming here and moving around. So on Long Meg, you know, there are lots of good kind of drawings and photographs and 3D models of Long Meg online, which you'll be able to find and have a look at, and you'll be able to look at those carvings in great detail. They're not technically cup and ring marks, as we might understand that we get a lot of rock art in the UK, particularly in Scotland and in Ireland. They're concentric circles, and that motif is repeated on Long Meg in various spots. There are concentric looking circles on the Glastonbury stone. There are also kind of linear and V-shaped elements on that as well, which aren't evident here on this site. So there are different styles at work here. And yes, if you want to kind of go for this sense of different regions having different design styles, then we'd see a kind of a whole host of those different styles in this region in particular.
Awesome, thank you. 2 more questions, 2 more, we'll squeeze in 2. Nigel's asked quite a good one. He's said, how certain can we really be about the meaning and importance of these monuments to Neolithic people? I think in any study of the past, you have to be very careful not to project your own understanding and your own experiences onto the past. But archaeology is a really valuable tool in sort of starting to understand these aspects of our history where we don't have these written records, where things are prehistoric in every sense. Do you have any feelings about that, Jodie? Any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things to think about here. I mean, I always think that, you know, if you think about the sheer effort of will in terms of the number of people who have to come to do this and the sheer labour force that goes involved in dragging these things and setting them up, it's not a casual endeavour. And it also happens at a time of subsistence living where, you know, life will be hard, life will be entirely dependent on the seasons and the weather. And so really, you know, you think the only way that people can do this is probably in the height of summer where living is a little easier. And people can kind of step away from that day-to-day survival existence to come away and to do something like this. So, you know, I think the sheer fact of the effort and the labour and the coordination of people that's involved to do this, it's important. It has to be. There has to be a kind of compelling sense of why you do this and why it's so important. The kind of the other side of that, which is something that, you know, Paul talked about, religion in inverted commas, is a sense that's really difficult to project into the past. You know, we tend to live, particularly in the Western world, in quite separated ideas of there's the everyday parochial things that are about life or work or whatever, and then you might go to a church on Sunday or similar. And for kind of a lot of people, and certainly the way that society and culture kind of tends to go, these things become increasingly separated. That can't be true the further back in time you go. So I always think, you know, is it just simply that for some kind of slightly mystical, spiritual reason people are dragging these stones here? There's a whole host of other practical considerations that go into that as well. You know, the end of the Neolithic, and we're kind of cultivating crops and domesticating and planting and farming. If you're wanting to plough a field and plant it with crops and you've got a great big boulder sat in the middle of it, you probably want to try and drag that boulder out of the field that you're trying to grow things in anyway. So what are you going to do with all of these stones that are littered around the landscape? You know, and this happens, you know, how many stone circles are there in the British Isles? Over 1,000, 1,300. So, you know, it's a significant enough thing that they do this thousands of times. For, like I say, yes, clearly there's got to be significance here, but it's also a practical thing in terms of clearing the landscape, providing this meeting place, which is really important important. Where do you exchange your goods and your animals? Where do you meet people to marry? You know, how do you get people together to celebrate and to socialize and to do all of these things? So I think it's undoubtedly, these sites are important, but they're important for so many reasons that are really interconnected. That's just absolutely fascinating to think about. And yes, we will always be fighting with our sense of projecting our values into our interpretation, but that's part of the fun, I think, having to think laterally and outside the box as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And then just one quick sentence answer, Jodie. When does this dig finish?
We're here until Sunday. So yeah, we've just passed the halfway mark. We have some interesting weather heading our way, perhaps over the next day or two. So yeah, we start to get that feeling of course, everything needs to be very carefully backfilled and put back the way that it was by the end of Sunday. We need to do all of our recording, photography, our context sheets. So yeah, Sunday we will all be wrapped up and done, and it will be as if we were never here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We've gone slightly over our time, so thank you for everyone who's stuck with us. I'll keep you for just a couple minutes more while I do a quick wrap up and tell you how you can get involved further. But before I do, I want to say thank you again to Jodie and to Paul for sharing their insight, their knowledge, for giving us this tour today and being out there on the site. It was really fantastic. Like I said before we started, I'm a big stone circle nerd myself, so it's very exciting to get to learn all this and see it all in person. And again, I'll just take one more chance to shout out a nice thank you to Fellfoot Forward, to the North Pennines AONB, and to our funders, the National Lottery Heritage Fund and Cumbria County Council, for making all of this possible in the first place. If you would like to get involved further with Fellfoot Forward, I've just shared my screen. You can head to their website, which is just there. You'll see this in the recording. I'll also attach it in the email, so don't worry, you don't need to memorize this just yet. But here you can join their newsletter and the Facebook group. So if you do live locally in this area and you'd like to be involved in other projects like this and uncovering the past and other sort of opportunities, then that's definitely the place to go and find out more there. And of course, if you would like to get involved with us, with DigVentures as well, you can head to our website, digventures.com, to find out more about what we do, our online courses, events, etc. And please do follow us on social media as well. We share so much about what we find and what we do on there. And of course, in December, our new dates for 2023 will be released and open for bookings. So if you'd like to join us on a dig next year, we'd love to have you along. So please do check that out if you're interested. So without further ado, I'll say a very fond farewell to all of you and to Jodie and Paul as well. It's been lovely to have you. You've been a really fantastic audience. And hopefully we'll see you again very soon. Do look out for the recording and see you later, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.